Hey, good morning, interns, and everybody else who might be watching this. Do not forget, St. Louis City and St. Louis County have issued a mandate of wearing masks in public. So, a little recommendation from risk management professionals here is find a mask that is not only going to be effective, but it's going to keep people away from you when you go to Schnucks or Costco or Walmart. This mask works wonderfully. Actually, one of two reactions. They either smile, look away, or walk away very fast, which is perfect, which is exactly what you want them to do. Stay away from you. And since it's hard to hear me with that mask on, and it did mess up my hair a little bit, I'm wearing this ball cap to make myself more presentable. So, good morning, everybody, and whoever else is watching this. Welcome to Insurance 101. I'm George Gladys. I'm your professor for the series. I've been teaching for over 20 years throughout the United States. If you looked at my LinkedIn site, you'll see pictures of me standing in front of large classrooms of 85 to 120 people, and I'm standing way back there. And since March, we have canceled all of those classes and are now going virtual and online throughout the world. I've been asked to do this because some of you need college credits and others just need to learn about the insurance business. So as you see, I have my HM attire on, which is always appropriate when you go out in public. Wear your HM attire so that everybody knows who you work for and what you do. And then they will walk up to you and say, "Can you sell me an insurance policy?" Which would be perfect. The other thing is, as you see, I have my Cardinals cap on because those poor boys are not going to get paid nearly what they contracted for these coming years. So let's just jump into it. Insurance 1.01, and we will continue these with other series addressing particular parts of the, did you get that? That was specific and particular, all in one word, particular parts of the insurance world. Today we're going to talk about insurance contracts. Some of you know them as policies, insurance contracts. And then we will go on and talk about property, liability, auto, workers' compensation, etc. in future sections. But today we're just going to talk about the policy. Who got up the earliest this morning? You got up at 5:30? 6 o'clock? You got up at 5? Well, let's see. It's now 9 o'clock. So you've been up for 4 hours. In those last 4 hours, how many risks have you been exposed to? How many perils have you been exposed to? Did you drive anywhere? Were you texting or emailing or on your cell phone when you were driving? Were you putting makeup on while you were driving? Did you take a shower this morning? Let's see, you voluntarily stepped into a closed container, slathered yourself down with a slick substance. Let's see, when you got out, did you turn on any electric appliances? Dripping wet? All of the outlets in your bathroom have ground fault interrupts, correct? I do this class for a bunch of high school seniors here in town every year as they're about to graduate and go off to college all over the world. And I talk with them about risk. And that's what this question's really aimed at. How many risks are you exposed to in your normal daily life? Which leads me to the first question of the series. What are the 3 natural reactions to risk? Avoid, retain, transfer. Write those down. Avoid, retain, transfer. Now, avoid. If you're not going to get in an auto accident, that means you're never going to sit in an auto, drive an auto, be in an auto. That's how you avoid auto accidents. If you're not going to be caught in a hurricane, you don't stay on the coast or in the Caribbean as a low pressure system is coming across the South Atlantic. If you don't want to die in an airplane accident, you'd never get on airplanes. That's avoid. Transfer. Typically we see these in contracts. Indemnity, hold harmless, insurance clauses in contracts. Real estate contracts, leases, negotiations for purchase and sale of companies, contracts typically have a clause, the party of the first part hereby agrees to indemnify and hold harmless the party of the second part, etc., etc. What we've done is transfer risk from one party to another party via a written contract, which is valid and enforceable under common law, which is the law of the land in the United States, having been adopted from Great Britain. Now let's talk about retain. I had a mask on just a moment ago. All of those viruses, those aerolized viruses that are all over the air inside Costco and Schnucks, did I avoid those because I had that mask on? Or did I transfer them? Or did I retain them? I would say we've retained that risk. Now, for all the risk that we retain, driving an auto, taking a shower in the morning, there are two necessary elements of risk that we have to retain. We control them and we finance them. Control them with masks. We control them with blinkers when we're changing lanes. We control them with looking in our rearview mirror and make sure there's nobody behind us when we're backing up. We finance them one of two ways. Again, I hope you're writing this down. The first thing you wrote down was avoid, retain, transfer. The second thing is, for those risks that we retain, we control them and we finance them. Now the third thing to write down, for those risks that we finance, we have two sources of financing. Internal financing, which is our balance sheet, our checkbook, our assets, or a third party's assets, a third party's financing, which we find in an insurance policy. An insurance policy, which everybody's very familiar with. You've seen these, you have these. If you have a personal auto, you have a personal auto policy. The reason you do have one, I know, is because you follow the law, and the law in Missouri says if you have an auto, you have to have and purchase a liability policy. I will refer to these throughout this series, either as a policy or a contract. It is a contract. Technically, it is a unilateral contract of adhesion. Don't worry, that's never going to be on your test, but you need to know that. And what I mean by that is the underwriter, the carrier, composes, drafts, and files that policy, and you have no opportunity to negotiate it, change it, modify it, etc. It is unilateral. And what the courts have decided, since in fact the carriers negotiate it and hand it to you, that in fact if there's any opportunity for ambiguity, the judgment is going to go in favor of the plaintiff who is suing the insurance company, because the court believes that the insurance company would not draft a policy that is injurious to itself, that it would always be advantageous to itself. So if there's ambiguity, the ambiguity is going to run to the plaintiff, the defendant being the insurance company, a unilateral contract of adhesion. The second thing about these policies, there are 6 parts to every policy. You pick up every policy you've ever seen. There are 6 parts of it. The very first part is the declaration page. This page has on it the dates that the policy is effective, who is insured, limits, deductibles, premium. It's the declaration page. That's the first part of the contract. The second part of the contract is the coverage form. What's covered? In 2020, we typically have what we call, very colloquially, all risk policies. I say that because the term all risk no longer exists in any of these policies. The courts have consistently knocked down that language. If anything, they are all risk except for exclusions. And so we no longer see all risk policies. What we have now is what's called special form. And when we talk about property and liability and auto and the other policies, I'll go into that in more detail. What is a special form perils policy? First part is the declaration page. Second part is coverage form. Third part is exclusions. Now, if in fact this policy is all risk except for exclusions, how much paperwork do you think it would take to describe the universe of everything that is possible? It would fill up this room behind me, this whole house, maybe even my backyard. So instead, what the underwriters do is the first line is, we will pay for those claims except for those that are excluded. So they say the universe of claims is covered except for exclusions. So if you're ever going to read a policy, and reading a policy is so much fun, it puts you to sleep very well. It's great reading on an airplane flight. If you're going to read a policy, go to exclusions. Policies cover everything except for exclusions. Declaration page, coverage form, exclusions. Fourth piece is who is an insured. It describes, in a homeowner's policy, a renter's policy, who is you and who is we. We is the underwriter, we is the carrier, you is the insured, plus anybody in your family living in the household, anybody in your family for whom you give permission to drive your car, meaning it's not stolen, you've been driving your car, who is an insured. Then we have definitions. Declaration page, coverage form, exclusions, who is an insured, definitions. Definitions are key. Definitions are what a lot of insurance litigation is about. How do you define a claim? How do you define an occurrence? How do you define bodily injury? I'm an expert witness, have been an expert witness for a dozen years or so. Almost all of the cases that I've been involved in as an expert witness go right to the definitions page. That clears up a lot of ambiguity. And then the sixth section of all the policies is terms and conditions. Every policy you see has on it terms and conditions. Okay, now for this little session and for all the remaining sessions that we're going to deal with over the next couple of weeks, here's some ground rules that you need to be aware of. What I'm proposing to do is, you watch this video, send me an email, because I don't have your email addresses. Send me an email, G, Greek G, that's 3 G's, GGREEKG @att.net. The word Greek in there for an obvious reason. That's my heritage, that's my background. GGreekG@att.net. Send me your email, and what we will do is set up either a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting following this for a quick half an hour of discussions, questions, etc., of what you have thought about, have written down, questions that you have, so that everybody can learn. And during those sessions, the ground rules are going to be very simple. Anybody's cell phone rings during this class, it costs you $1. Dollar doesn't go to me. It's going to go to Ronald McDonald House here in St. Louis. Dan Harbaugh is the executive director and president, and he thanks you graciously for every donation. You'll get a tax write-off. Anybody yawns or starts falling asleep, costs you $1. Anybody takes a shot at anybody else during those conversations, during those Zoom meetings, it costs you $1. You take a shot at me, those feel really good. Take a shot at me, costs you $5. I was teaching in Jacksonville, Florida about 2 years ago. I'm in the middle of my class. It's about 8:30 in the morning. We're moving. Somebody 5 or 6 rows in the back over on the side says something. Everybody around him starts laughing. So I walk over. I said, "What'd you say?" He doesn't want to say it. Everybody around him, "Go ahead, tell him." So he says it. It's a shot at me. I asked the class, "Do you think this is a shot at me?" It sounds like a shot at me. He gets up, walks over, slaps down a $20 bill, and says, "That's my tab." So be careful teaching classes because sometimes it's a really tough class. So now, let's talk about this contract, unless there's any questions. The most important part about this contract, and you've heard me say it already, is exclusions and definitions. Right now, we're in the midst of this huge virus, civil authority, lockdown pandemic. What is the biggest issue? Potential claims under business interruption. I'm being told to shut down my business. I didn't have a fire, windstorm, hail, theft, hepatitis B, breakout, anything. I'm being told to shut down my business. I have a loss of income. I have a policy here, in fact, has a specific clause that says business interruption. I want to make a claim. Well, let's read that policy. And let's see what a claim under business interruption is triggered by. And what we're going to find is that the great majority of claims under business interruption are going to be denied because of the language in the contract. Insurance contracts came from, and I mentioned it before, British common law. Now, historical trivia for 200. When was the Magna Carta signed? Anybody? Magna Carta. Latin. Great law. Oh, I forgot to mention. Quick little bit of background. Been in the business for 30 plus years. Have been teaching for 20 plus years. Spent a little time in the seminary, undergraduate. And so every now and then a little bit of Aristotle may leak out, a little bit of philosophy, a little bit of free will, Aristotelian versus city of God, predetermination. Don't get wonked out about it. Philosophy degrees are absolutely no good. That's why I went back and got a second degree in accounting and business at St. Louis University. And then got into the business world and started selling insurance policies instead of putting a Roman collar on and standing up at Mass and playing priest. When was the Magna Carta signed? 1520. Who was the king? Prior to 1520, everything in the British Isles, all the land, all the cattle, all the people, all the crops, were all the property of the crown. Everybody was a serf. Everybody lived at the pleasure of the king. And in 1520, King John signed the Magna Carta, which did two things. One, it established for the first time in the Western world private property. You now own the house that you live in on the land on which it's built. And the cattle that are within the demised premises of your property, you own. Private property. That was the beginning in 1520. Prior to 1520, nobody owned their own house. Nobody owned the land underneath that house. The second thing that the Magna Carta did is establish what we now call common law. Common law says that with the exception of contracts for real estate, all other contracts are enforceable in a court of law, and they don't even have to be in writing. Verbal contracts are enforceable in a court of law. If you go to law school and you take Contracts 101, you start off with British common law. Now, I run into somebody at a stoplight. I'm distracted. I'm on my cell phone. I'm looking at the person in the car next to me. I now have an occasion of liability. Negligence. The four necessary elements of negligence. Duty. I have a duty not to hurt something or somebody. I have breached that duty. There has been an occasion of bodily injury or property damage, and there is causation. There is a direct relationship between the breach and the bodily injury and property damage. The four necessary elements of liability. Those are established in British common law. We will talk more about those in the world of the Comprehensive General Liability Policy, the CGL form. But today, what you have to know, and what I'm trying to bring forward here, is the thought that I really don't want to use my assets and my checkbook and my savings account to pay for an instance of bodily injury or property damage that I have been liable for. I would rather use somebody else's assets, i.e. an insurance company. I mentioned before, this policy is a unilateral contract of adhesion. On a practical basis, it's an option contract. Those of you who are familiar with stock options, you know that you have puts and calls. This is technically known as a put. If you have hail damage on your roof, are you obligated to make a claim? No. If somebody runs into you, a fender bender, are you obligated to make a claim? No. It's an option contract. You have the option to take this contract and put it into the hands of the underwriter and say, pay off, subject to terms and conditions, exclusions, deductibles, etc. Pay off. It is an option contract. You are not obligated to use it. You can if you'd like. So these option contracts have language in them about your ability to make a claim to the underwriter. The underwriter's ability to deny the claim, delay the claim, not pay the claim, and what recourse you have. So, we're going to talk about these policies in coming sessions. We're going to talk about property forms, liability forms, auto forms, workers' compensation, crime, etc. Each one's going to be a short 10, 15, 20-minute video, and we're going to follow it up with, like I say, a Zoom or a team meeting. So, here's what I want you to leave. I want to leave with you at the end of this meeting. What are the three reactions to risk? Avoid, retain, transfer. For those risks that you retain, what are your two necessary elements? Control, finance. Of those finance options, you have internal funds, which are your funds, external funds, which is the insurance company policy. Third, you have my email address. Send me your email and let's set up a Zoom meeting 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the morning, Monday or Tuesday of next week, and follow up with some questions. What I want you to think about is what are those particular areas of the world of insurance that you'd like to have addressed that is of particular interest to you? What questions do you have following everything that you've watched here this morning? And remember, go get a mask to wear out in public because this virus is very dangerous. If you know anybody who's gotten it, they never want to get it again. Okay, thanks for watching. Talk to you soon. Bye.